my wife will say things like, they just have to have that. And there's something about that with the stars that I know.
I'm going to throw at you a few questions from the audience. This first one is, this is actually connected to Midnight Sky, so we'll start with this one. This is from Sandra Manetti, and who wonders how, if at all, the experience of making Midnight Sky changed the way that you looked at the world and your place in it, particularly, bearing in mind the events of the past year.
I'm not sure that the movie changes your mind. I'm not sure movies I'm not quite sure movies change people's minds in general. I think that they just talk about subjects. There are a few times, you and I had talked about this before we started. There are a few films that have changed people's minds, sometimes not for the best. The original Birth of a Nation brought back the KKK, changed people's minds in the worst possible way. Not often. I think most of the time it just reflects where we are. And I thought the film to me was reflecting where we are as in mankind. I didn't, this is before the pandemic, as I said, but I did feel like it was reflecting this sort of sad, sorrowful feeling that we're unable to connect with one another or get along with one another, and the issues that could come from that, the things that were left coming from that worry me. They always do.
Okay, here's a question now from Darren Campion, and Darren is wondering, and we have slightly touched on that, but it's say that some actors can't watch themselves on screen. As a director, clearly you have to.
I have to.
So it's that kind of disconnect. How do you actually manage to hold on to that?
Well, watching yourself on screen is a weird thing, always. It's a funny thing, since everybody's got, one of these, a phone, they're all taking pictures of themselves and videoing themselves. And so they've all seen themselves on screen much more than we used to. So, like my kids, I showed them, we were screening, I was editing, and they came in, it was on a big screen, and I was cutting on it. And the kids came in, and Amal said, "There's Papa on the screen." And they're like, yeah. And it's not amazing to them because they've seen, everybody on screen already. And so I'm not sure that, I don't know. I find that it's fine. I look at things like I can look back at, you showed me Out of Sight, and I look at that and go, well, I look like that guy's father now. And the reality is, you tell me it's 25 years later, and I probably could be his father. But I just look at that as you showed me some scenes tonight. I don't remember shooting the scenes. I don't remember shooting the scene in ER at all, except that I remember it was cold. So I can watch them as sort of go, oh, that's funny. Or there isn't a single performance any actor, and unless there's some actor I don't know, there's not a single performance any actor could look back at and say, give me another shot. I could do it better. There's not one. I can watch every single performance you watch. You go, oh God, or you think that you stepped on something really obvious, and but it does reflect a place and time where you were, and I think that's always interesting.
Okay, now I've got an interesting question here from Ken Ross, and Ken says, congratulates you on your incredible career, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is one of his most favorite films. But he's saying, that generally in the industry, trying to level up to create more opportunities for people with learning disabilities in the film industry. Do you have any ideas? Do you think things that could help organizations like BAFTA to give this a boost?
That's a good idea. That's a good question. I will say this, there's an interesting moment right now going on. First of all, I do see a turn towards inclusion that I haven't seen in a long time, that I'm excited about on a lot of levels. I also see, I know that there's this panic about cinemas because they're not being looked after by our governments, and which it's a huge industry. It should be looked after. We subsidize oil companies. We could subsidize the movie theaters for a period of time. But I'm not worried about us being back. I'm not worried about cinema will always exist. We're all going to be back together and be. You still have to go out sometime, right? You still have to go to a concert. You still have to go see a movie. We want a collective. But here's what streaming services have done. They've democratized and opened up so many different avenues of storytelling for young, interesting storytellers that, there's when I first came to Hollywood in 1982, if you got a show, like in 1984, I had a TV show, and you'd open up the newspaper on a Monday morning to see what the ratings were. And there were 64 shows. And on those 64 shows, you'd see where your number is and realize whether or not you were going to have a job next week, right? Maybe 50 of them were acting jobs. Some of them were news shows or something. 50 shows and maybe 50 films that year were being made. There's no room. There was no room for any of these sort of, for opening up all of these other doors of all of these other experiences that are just being, shoved away or played by, an actor who isn't working with disabilities and all those kind of things. But now between the streaming services and everything, there's thousands and thousands of acting jobs and directing jobs and writing jobs and producing jobs. The world is open, and there's in need of content. So I'm really excited and hopeful as I see this sort of blossom in the idea that there's going to be more and more and more of this opening up. And I completely understand the question, and I think we're going in the right direction. I hope. Look, I've been wrong before about this, but I think we're going in the right direction.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I've got before we sort of wind things up, because we're getting towards the end of the time now, I've got a question about, you said just now about Paul Newman, you said, and there was a real movie star. Yeah. I mean, this whole thing about stardom, it is interesting because you are. I mean, you have whatever the star thing is, you have it. And I just wondered if you had any reflections on, not to say I know why I am, but it is interesting that there are so few people who seem to attract that.
I don't know. I can't comment on that because I can't comment on what people perceive or how I'm perceived by other people. I can comment on movie stars in general. I know a few of them, and I've known some big ones. I was really good friends with Gregory Peck. He was a big one, Newman. There's some other ones that I'm friends with that are movie stars, proper movie stars. Brad Pitt's a movie star. Julia Roberts is a movie star. And I suppose the only thing, was it? I can't remember who it was. It was a government official once said, I can't give you the definition of porn, but I know it when I see it. It's sort of that way with those stars. There's not one specific thing. There's something intangible about them that I see that is impossible to describe. It's just, you watch Gary Cooper, who, is a really interesting actor, and Bogart and guys like that. And you go, why are those guys movie stars? Why is Bogart a movie star? He doesn't look like Cary Grant, But you couldn't take your eyes off him. And you couldn't. And same thing with Spencer Tracy. You can't take your eye off that guy. No matter what he did, you watch him like clockwork. I can't describe it. Can't figure it out. But it is something that is, I think, is a real thing. I think people are attracted to that. Sandy Bullock's a movie star, and I worked with her, and I've known her since she wasn't a movie star, when we were both young actors. And even then, there was something about Sandy that you just knew she was going to be a hit. You just knew it. I knew it when I first met her, and she was dating my friend Tate Donovan, and she was just this really nice young girl who was a good actor. We didn't even know if she was a good actress. We hadn't seen her act yet, but she had there was something about it. My wife will say things like, they just have to have that. And there's something about that with the stars that I know, if you're asking me about other movie stars. For me, I wouldn't dare comment and couldn't comment on how other people perceive me, but the people that I know who are stars, Gregory Peck, he was, I don't know, 80 and sitting in his chair. I remember I was with him the night of the 2000 election. And it was when at first they announced that Al Gore had won. And then they came back and said, actually, no, we think George Bush has won. And he kind of leans over and he's like, it's a son of a bitch, ain't it? And I was like, it's a son of a bitch, Greg. And just this beautiful, deep voice and kind of laughing about it and like how insane the world was. But his voice just, at 80 or whatever, maybe he was in his late 70s, whatever it was, he just, he was a movie star then. Can't explain it. Don't know why.
Well, George, thank you very much indeed. I have to say that The Midnight Sky will be streaming on Netflix from December the 23rd. Is that right? December the 23rd. I should thank TCL, who've been the supporting
Yes.
for this BAFTA Life in Pictures. And I would like to thank you for your questions and you, wider audience, for joining us. But most of all, George, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for staying up late and doing this too, because this is, a long evening for you. So thank you.